I speak at many places. Honestly, I've been very fortunate. I've spoken all over the state to various organizations, but come back and be here with Dillon to our historical society. What you all represent for our county is an honor to me, a real honor. But when I was doing something yesterday in Columbia, I teach at the law school. I teach American legal history. And I'm going to be leaving the bench, by the way, after 35 years wearing the robe. I'm going to leave, and the law firm wants me to work with them doing mediation. The law now requires you cannot go to court unless you first attempt to resolve the case with a certified mediator. And I went and got certified, so I'm a certified mediator, and I'm going to go to work with that law firm. And they have offices all over the state, this big law firm, and but I'm going to try to do at the beach, be here, go down there, come back, and all that. But I have a little condo in Cherry Grove. But I taught my class yesterday in Columbia, and I said, well, I've got nothing going on Tuesdays. I'm going back down to the beach and be at that office to help get it organized there and all that. Myrtle Beach. I'm there organizing the office, and I just had to look at the phone, the calendar, and speaking tonight at the Dillon County Historical Society. So I said, oh, well, I guess I'll leave a little early, I thought, and I called Chris, make sure I didn't have an error about that, and didn't let him know I didn't know I was speaking. But I told him some things I'd like to say, because there are some things I'd like to talk about. But before I get into the two main topics, one, the 250th and our part in it, our county's part in it, I want to let you know that the law school has a lot of pro bono work they do with lawyers and law students. Pro bono means doing it for the good meaning free. And on November the 1st, if you're interested, one of my students is in charge of pro bono at the law school, and I've discussed things with him. They're bringing a big van, just like, remember those bookmobile vans, but this one has all kind of stuff in it that they can actually practice law in the vans. They're so large, and they're going to bring some lawyers with them, and they're going to do free wills and powers of attorney and a couple of legal advice if you need it. So November the 1st from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock, I guess, or 2 to 4, I think it is. They're going to, and I've taught to get them the space there at the courthouse. The van will park there between the city-county complex and the courthouse, and in some 7 or 8 parking spaces, they'll just put cones so they can pull that van up in there. And so if you all have an old will and you're not sure if things have changed, if it's still good the way you want it or whatever, or you just want to make a new will, go by and see them, or somebody to look at the one you've got and give you some thoughts about it. So that's November the 1st. There at the courthouse, between the courthouse and the city-county complex. Didn't want to forget to tell you all about that. About a year and a half ago, I came to you all and I discussed Dillon County's role in the Revolutionary War. I brought some slides, if you recall. It was right here in the slide. I had the screen over there, and I told you all about we need to somehow realize that what was at that time the Liberty District, wasn't Dillon County, obviously, that we were involved in the Revolutionary War. I did not know at that time how really much we were, and we are very much involved. I've talked now with David and other members of this committee to recognize the 250th, and Dillon County, what was the land that would later become Dillon County, was very much involved in the Revolutionary War. And then the state formed a 250th commission, and they put some money into it. It's going to be a statewide recognition. And when they say 250th, what they mean is 250 years from the Boston Massacre of March of 1770. So it really began in 2020. And it's going to go until 2033, 1783, when the Treaty of Paris ending the war and us having officially our independence. Now, of course, after Yorktown in October 1781, the war really ended, but there were still small skirmishes going on. We still had British troops in Charleston until December of 1782. That's the span of the 250th Commission. The highlight, the center of it though, as we know, is 2026, when on July the 4th, 2026, we'll be able to celebrate the 250th anniversary of what we recognize as Independence Day, the day they adopted the resolution to declare independence from Great Britain. Now, each county, since I've spoken with you, has formed a commission. Dillon County has formed a commission. I went and requested the county council to do so, and they agreed and appointed me chairperson of that commission, and then I went out and got various committee members. We've got David here from the Historical Society is on there. We have, as y'all know, Johnny Lewis, Pat Laird, we have Justin Foxworth. We have your vice president I saw now, Ms. Buffet, and others that are on the committee that are working very, very hard to make sure Dillon County is involved. We also have, I don't know if y'all know it or not, but Ashley Blay lives in Latta. She is on the PD Tourism. She's on our committee also. But Dillon County has hard-working members of that commission. Pat Laird is going to get together, and we've already got a grant that we're going to try and put up signs, and not like the old signs that you saw where you have a piece of metal with wording on it. We're going to have these modern signs where you put your phone up, and what do you call that when you touch it?
The QR code.
It's a QR code. Put your phone up, and then it tells you what that marker is all about. It's going to have a word or two on it, but then you put the QR code. And I'm going to tell you about a couple of the signs in a second. So we've got grant money to do that already. What we have thought is that it appears that even in the PD, most people don't think Dillon County has anything to do with the Revolutionary War. Were you at that meeting with us at the PD the other night?
No, for the over at that farmhouse.
At the farmhouse. Florence organized a gathering of all the PD counties so we can make sure we have a unified effort. And so they had a map up, and they want to create a sort of a trail through the PD that runs, of course, right through Florence, and where there really wasn't very much going on during the Revolutionary War. But they wanted a trail, and they had all these various sites for things and all that, but not one site from Dillon. And so luckily, they gave us an opportunity. It was all over. Anybody had anything to say? And so I came up and mentioned that, you know, they left out a lot of things. Let me give you a scenario, ladies and gentlemen. The Revolutionary War, beginning in June of '75, when you had election in Concord, April the 19th, and then Washington taking command in June of '75, and then in '76, him fighting through and losing about every battle but one, the one at Princeton. But Washington lost most of the battles of the Revolutionary War. There were not many of them that were won. A few of them were big and significant. There were one like Mama and things of that nature, and of course Saratoga that Washington wasn't involved in. But most of the battles were lost, but it was just keeping the war going. So the British were getting tired. They were getting very upset that they were losing soldiers and spending so much money. And so it was a sense of, let's keep this thing going. And the Congress had to keep moving around and all that. But the war kept going and kept going. And then finally the British said, here's what we can do. Let's go down to the South, where we know there are more people who want to stay part of Great Britain and be loyal to King George than we have up in the North where Washington, those people are. So they came and invaded in May of 1780 South Carolina and Georgia. And they basically were victorious in South Carolina, landed, and Benjamin Lincoln, who commanded all the troops here, surrendered 5,000 Continental American troops, the largest surrender of anything during the war, and it was looking kind of bad. Luckily, the governor, Rutledge, who's another story altogether, but Rutledge talked a few people into saying, don't surrender. I'm not going to surrender. I'm going to take government. We're going to keep the South Carolina government going somewhere else. but he taught the guy, lieutenant guy named Francis Marion, to leave. At this time, he wasn't known as a swamp fox. He was just a militia soldier. He leaves and goes into the swamps, and later on becomes a swamp fox. Thomas Sumter, the gamecock. And so he taught several people in the leaving and continued. Jasper, Sergeant Jasper, the only person that you got counties in 2 states named after him for the same thing. Remember, he's the one who held the palmetto tree, the palmetto flag up with the logs and everything else. A very heroic guy that was killed, by the way, shortly after the fall of Charleston, fighting as a guerrilla. But some of them left. But most people surrendered. Well, the British now had brought South Carolina back in to the British Empire, as well as Georgia. They thought it's only a matter of time, North Carolina, Virginia, and by that time we're going to have so much of the country back in to Great Britain that Washington's going to have to give up. And so it looked kind of bleak. And after Charleston, Washington sent Horatio Gates, who had won the Battle of Saratoga, and a lot of Continental soldiers into Camden to fight the British after they had conquered Charleston, see if he can run them back out of the state. Well, that was in August of 1780, 3 months after they had invaded in May. Gates not only lost the battle, it was a disaster. It was a rout. It was a massacre. Gates, in fact, after the battle only going on about 30 minutes, got on his horse and was riding back to Charlotte, trying to get away by himself. And you had many of those who escaped were tracked down by Bannister Tarleton, the Green Dragoon with the British, and massacred. Buford and his little army was called up close to Rock Hill, and they were massacred. And so it really looked bleak now. You've got Charleston has fallen, Camden, the big battle, has been a big defeat, and so it looks bad. We all think, well, hey, there's only another year and a half and the war's over. Well, it looked really bad in the summer of 1780. One good thing happened a month after Gates's defeat. A couple of weeks after the massacre of Buford, who had escaped Camden but got caught by Bannister Tarleton close to Rock Hill. In a little area in the northeast part of South Carolina, where there was a little ferry called Rouse's Ferry. Now it's called Harley's Bridge. In that little area, a group of patriots decided they were going to fight. A group of loyalists who now, because they were so energized by the British taking over South Carolina, these patriots fought and won the Battle of Rouse's Ferry. Finally, good news! Good news! South is not lost altogether. And from Rouse's Ferry, you end up with the British Army going into to the upstate, thinking they're going to finish off all the colonial regulars and militia, and of course losing in January of 81 at Cowpens, losing in Kings Mountain, going up into North Carolina and having a tie there, but then deciding we can't get back to Charleston, we still have troops there, let's go to Yorktown where we can get resupplied. And take another 30 minutes to tell you about all that, but I won't. But the end result is they get boxed up in Yorktown, and Washington says, hey man, there's a lot of stuff going on down south. I think I'm going to bring my army down south. So he brings his army to Yorktown to put a siege on the British at Yorktown, and they surrender in October of 81, which is in essence the end of the war, because by then when that happens, the British say, oh my God, let's just give up this stuff, it ain't worth it. And they fight on for a little skirmishes here and there, but they finally sign a peace treaty. Ladies and gentlemen, my argument is what we now call Dillon County, to me, was the beginning of our independence, was the beginning of the victory for independence in the Revolutionary War at Rouse's Ferry. You can follow up Rouse's Ferry with another victory at Bear Swamp towards Lakeview, another one at Bass's Mill towards Latta, and then a larger Bass's Mill at the Dillon County, now Marion County line. We can't overlook our role, our important role in that, and I want to make sure the 250th Commission realizes that. What I suggested to them at that meeting when the Florence representative said, let's do this, and da-da-da. I said, that's great, but why don't we form a PD committee and have one member from each county in the PD be on this committee and decide if we're going to do this and have a joint effort, that's fine. And also to make sure they knew I wasn't trying to say, I want to do this. I'm going to appoint, if they do that, somebody from our committee, not me, to be on that PD committee, so we can have a joint PD effort in recognizing the PD itself. I said, we need to join with Marion County about Bass's Mill because it's right on the line, and it was a very significant Loyalist victory. But one thing that we got to get away from is imagining that the Revolutionary War here in the South was only fought with people in uniform, blue uniform colonials, Continental Army, and red uniform British. The war here in what is now Dillon County and most of our state were fought with farmers and merchants and brothers and sisters and fathers and sons fighting against each other. Fighting against each other. And many times not fighting through the rules of war, but fighting just to win no matter what. We had many buffets fighting. There's a cemetery up there close out to McLaurin Lake that has some of our Revolutionary War heroes who fought as militia, not being paid, not wearing uniforms, just fighting as patriots. John Bethea, they called him Devil John Bethea. Why? Because when one time they won and this one loyalist had been really hassling him and they finally captured him and they wanted to execute him. So they found a tree to hang him. This loyalist is a pretty big, tall guy. They put the rope around the tree and put it around his neck, but his feet still touched the ground. So Devil John Bethea said, I'll just break his daggum knees. He didn't say daggum. And he broke his knees. So then he got him, and they hung him to show you the ruthlessness of the way the battles were fought. But that was occurring right here in our homeland. In our homeland. The first documented case, I can argue, of PTSD occurred close to where Shula's Barbecue is. After the war was basically over, some of the loyalists didn't want to admit it. They still wanted to say they could fight. And now they were no longer soldiers and treated as British, agents. They were now outlaws. And so patriots who called them said, you're outlaws. Because they were still trying to fight and steal and break up farms, steal things. And so they found this one guy named Courtney. And he was fighting as a loyalist. A group led by a guy named Odom found him right there in that big field next to Shula's Barbecue that Norton owns. And so Odom said, all right, we got him. Somebody kill him. And Courtney said, please don't kill me. Please don't kill me. I'll quit, I promise. And Odom said, no, we're killing you. And so he ordered his guys to shoot him. They said, we just can't shoot him with him looking at us, begging him, and all that. The war's over. Let's try to, somehow get along. And Odom says, well, I'll kill him. And Odom gets the gun and bam, shoots and kills Courtney, the killing of Courtney. For the rest of his life, Odom had nightmares, went to drinking heavy, depression, and was never, ever the same after doing that. To me, that is our definition of PTSD. And it occurred in the Revolutionary War right here in what is now Dillon County. Those are some of the stories we're going to try to tell with the 250. Right now, we're just getting things geared up and all that. I would love to see at some point in time having a billboard in North Carolina saying, please, when you come up to South Carolina, turn and stop into Dillon County, where independence was won, or the beginning of independence for the United States of America, right here in Dillon County. I've talked with, I got the mayors of the various communities together and said, would you all agree that we could use the place that the city of Dillon has here on Redwood Avenue sort of as a center that we could put brochures and things. And David Longacre with the Woodman of the World, they're going to give us a bunch of Dillon County flags. We're going to buy some of those Betsy Ross type flags. And I'd like to have them all flying around there. So people that got off the interstate, they could see to come in there, get brochures, get information about where independence was won here in South Carolina. South Carolina had more battles in this state than any other state of the original 13 colonies. 1/3 of the entire battles of Revolutionary War were fought right here in South Carolina. And in Dillon County, we can show you a few that were fought here. So South Carolina is very important, and my argument is Dillon County is very significant in that importance if you look at the first victory after Camden and the sadness that was going on then. So we hope to tell that story. We're going to try in September of 2025 to begin our sort of action with a reenactment of the Battle of Rouse's Ferry. David says he knows some reenactors, and we're going to try to have a reenactment there. We're going to have to try to have a little reception and all that. Maybe something at south of the border in the convention center. Maybe some fireworks or something of that nature to kick off what we're going to do. We're going to have some various things at the theater. We're going to try to have something in the spring, gatherings of people to be aware, and maybe something at the school, essay contest with children, with students. And so we want everybody to be involved. We want you to be involved. We want you to be involved. So the 250th is getting planning, getting things going. And David, have I left out anything in our meetings that you want to bring up?
You'll actually be speaking at the theater in May, upcoming May, about the Revolutionary War. You are.
I am? Oh,
yes,
I am. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, in May. What I'm going to do, I'd love to try to draft a little play, a little rendition about the killing of Courtney. Can you imagine a guy named Odom shooting the guy begging for his life there? The war is basically over, and he does it. I thought I'd try to write a little something about that and then do a little conversation with that on the killing of Courtney. But I was going to try to do it at the theater. But you're going to organize and get our reenactors going. And we had a meeting with Ryan Schaefer. He's agreed for us that we can use the border for a gathering. And so Dillon County, the Historical Society, has got to be significant in that through the people we have on the committee from your society, and the city, the county of Dillon needs to be very, very, very much involved as we get going. That's all I wanted to say right now about.
Could you tell them the other locations? You mentioned the killing of Courtney and Rouse's Ferry.
Yeah, Rouse's Ferry, Bear Swamp, and Bass's Mill. Those are the major three areas that we have in Dillon. Well, four really with the killing of Courtney, but Bass's Mill, Bear Swamp, and Rouse's Ferry. And once again, it was not Continental soldiers, people in uniform fighting. These were people who were friends with each other a few weeks earlier, a few months earlier. Now they were fighting and killing each other. Fighting and killing each other. It's amazing how that happened. It would be good to sort of have some sort of study as to how they turned so quickly against each other in the battles that the Patriots finally won. Anything else you want to bring on 250th? I want to bring up two other things before we go. The next thing, ladies and gentlemen, on December the 15th, you all said you're going to have something at the Dillon House. You're going to have a little reception or something?
Yeah, the Christmas open house.
Do you know one day before that date, December the 14th, do you know what happened 115 years? No, 100, I guess from there, 15 years from that day. Earlier than that. December the 14th, 1909. Anybody know what happened on that date? You know, Betsy?
That's when Dillon decided they were going to separate from Marion.
That was when the election occurred, that Dillon County would become a county, a separate county. December the 14th, 1909, and the decision of what the county would be named. And then the fight until February, because there still was fighting going on after that about debating this and that, trying to delay as long as you could this new county. Then finally in February of 1910, Governor Ansel signs the bill. So beginning in December and then next year is the 115th anniversary of Dillon County. I know that it's not the 125th, it's not the 150th, but it's 115. And I hope that you all as a historical society would try to do that year, maybe starting in December, but at least in 2025, do some things about the history of our county. Some things about the fact that Dillon County, who were the first senators, the first representatives Senator Hazelton Manning, who I have a book that he signed when he was a boy when he got the book. That's about the Texian Revolution, written in 1838, believe it or not. And who our first representatives were. Some of the arguments about the battle for Dillon County. That battle that's really archived very well in the Archives and History up in Columbia. If you're going to look at the file they've got on it, with the letters back and forth, the arguments back and forth, the initial attempts that failed. Do you know that in 1906 we had a referendum and it lost? But guess what we were going to be called had we become a county in 1906? We were going to be Calhoun County, but we lost. And by the time we became a county in 1910, guess what already existed? Calhoun County already existed, so you couldn't have that name. And you know, it ended up being Dillon County. But something, and the arguments back and forth between Marion and Dillon, this battle for Dillon County. What about the fact we had the first ever officer killed in World War I was from Dillon County, John David, who's buried in France. Maybe we need to have some photographs of his burial site in France for those who go on a tour in Europe to go see the grave of John David. What about the Depression? How did the Depression hit Dillon County? 115 years plus the 15 years before the Depression came about. What was it like in Dillon County in that regard? What about some of the amazing trials, criminal trials that occurred in Dillon County? The last person executed was in the 1960s. Remember the Quincy Bullet trial? That thing is very, very tough to talk about still with a lot of people. I've got the transcript of the trial in my office, of the trial of Quincy Bullet. And he was executed, of course, the last person ever executed from Dillon County. What about Mr. Dillon where he's buried out of the cemetery? Isn't it time we get Abbott Shelley and let's get together and put some sort of marker of that cemetery where our founding father, Irishman, James W. Dillon, is buried? Isn't it time we do something like that? Plus honor Mr. Gordon, Dr. Gordon, that Gordon School is named after, doing something in that regard in the 115th anniversary. Plus, I know it's very tough to talk about, but maybe we need to revisit the situation of the 1980s. Maybe we need to visit the situation of the election situation and the prosecutions that occurred. And let's maybe get some oral histories and interview people to hear about what they're saying, what occurred, what they remember before it's all gone and they've all gone and we don't have a way of knowing what happened. So we can interview some live people who were involved in that amazing event in the 1980s. I still remember. And I want to tell you, this is something that I'll never forget in my life. I was up at the courthouse. Remember, many of you remember we used to go to the courthouse and we would count votes at the end of the election. You'd go there and everybody bring in the ballots and say, here's the ballots from this precinct, that precinct, and you know who won the election. And Mr. Schaefer was the chairman of the party. And it was a primary, because then, remember, the primaries were it. There were no general election issues. Primary, who won the primary was going to be the election. And I still remember there were people outside the courthouse because of the issues of that day. And that'd be a whole nother talk about what happened that year with the sheriff's election and the division between what used to be people together in elections. As Buzzy talked about, the daisy chain and things of that nature that were going on. But you had people now who thought they were going to overthrow the ruling class of elections in Dillon County. They were outside on the courthouse lawn, all waiting to hear that their candidate had won the sheriff's race and Mr. Schaefer's candidate had lost. They had hoped. And no one knew until the very end. And then, because there were a lot of absentee ballots cast for Mr. Schaefer's candidate, but then finally, when the final tallies came in, Alan Schaefer's candidate lost. Sheriff Lee lost. And he knew that crowd outside that courthouse were all just gunning for him. Ready, they were shouting and hollering. It was almost like a scene from Frankenstein, with people with torches waving, we're going to get Frankenstein, we're going to get Frankenstein. If you ever see that old movie. Alan Schaefer went down those steps, knowing it was over. He walked down the steps, courthouse in the front, looked at everybody out there. His car was parked there on Main Street. They were all shouting, "Hi, hi, 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 hi." And all of a sudden he stood and looked at them. Silence came over him as he saw him walking down the steps. And he walked right into them. They gradually separated as he walked back to his car and drove off. And we all know what happened after that, the prosecutions, him going to prison, others going to prison, and all that, the divisions back and forth. But to me, that's an amazing story, ladies and gentlemen. Just think about it. No matter what side you're on, you don't have to be on any sides, just the story of it. The story would be so amazing. And to hear from some people who actually were involved in what happened. What happened? I remember one guy testified in one of the state trials. They got him on the stand and said, "What do you do for a living?" "I'm a bookie." "What?" We had him say that, "I'm a bookie." And it's just the amazing stories that were going on at that time. And as we know, 2 years later, some people who run as independents, I consider myself an independent. I ran as an independent because I was not connected to any of them. Y'all remember Jamie Renfro? He ran for probate judge in '82, and we were able to get elected because there were no big machines going one way or the other, and they were fighting each other. But just what happened in the 1980s, what a story that would be, as far as we're looking at the 115th anniversary of Dillon County. So those are things, as a historical society, what if you think about looking at the 115th anniversary of our county and doing a few programs about various things. Betsy could probably find some things in the paper that were issued there. Unfortunately, you had a fire or something, and many of the issues are gone in the... another thing, too, I want to bring up. I've told y'all this before. I think next year's when we need to do it. There is no original copy of Governor Ansel signing the statute making Dillon County a county. The county doesn't know where it is. Nobody knows where it is. But J. David, with his family, because his family was very much involved at that time, has found a copy that he has. And he has it. The only one I know exists. We need to do something to have a guarantee of preservation of that. I told him I could take it to the archives in Columbia, but I wish we could do something here in Dillon with it. It's got the ribbon on it and everything else where it was bound together, tied together, the various pages of setting out the acreage and the lines of Dillon County signed by Governor Ansel. I mean, that would be also a good time during that year to have a ceremony to have this thing enshrined somewhere so it would be safe and we could keep it. Those are some things I just wanted to bring up to you about this county that you love. This county that I love, this county that is important in the history of the state and important in the history of this nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.